Hello everyone, and welcome to my casual discussion for the Black Society Trilogy, a compilation of a few of Takashi Miike's earliest works. Also, just look at that cover art, it's so beautiful. Now, because this is a casual discussion, this won't be as produced or as edited as my other full-fledged Takashi Miike reviews. So this is an impromptu video more akin to my Letterboxd Log series, which I'm considering calling What I've Been Watching, but that's beside the point. So how about we just jump right into it with the first film of the trilogy, Shinjuku Triad Society. A police officer named Tatsuhito hunts down a Taiwanese gang leader. With Tatsuhito's younger brother Yoshihito loyal to the boss, the cop tries to get his sibling back on the straight and narrow. For one, this is a very important piece in Miike's filmography. It's his first movie to premiere theatrically. For example, if you saw my Dead or Alive video, for one, this will definitely deepen you into some of Miike's earlier works, but not as early as the Black Society Trilogy. But for those who watched my video on this trilogy, you'll know that Miike got his start on V Cinema. In other words, after the Japanese economic boom crashed, well, he got his start in direct-to-video works. So this being his first film to release theatrically is very important to the director. And another thing connected with Dead or Alive, as is the last movie in this trilogy, is this one has Toshiki Kimura on it as producer, who produced, I think, all of the Dead or Alive trilogy. Toshiki Kimura, in fact, I'll probably bring up Dead or Alive quite a bit. This is a very good Blu-ray to have in companion to the Black Society Trilogy. Watching the interviews on this will definitely deepen your understanding of how the Black Society Trilogy came to be. In fact, particularly Shinjuku Triad Society, because Toshiki Kimura talks about how he and I think maybe Miike, but particularly Kimura, had a love for old Dai hard-boiled movies, and a producer gave him advice to pursue his own kind of movies, pursue his own hard-boiled kind of movies that he wanted to make, a new kind of hard-boiled movies. And thus came Shinjuku Triad Society, directed by Takashi Miike, who is pretty perfect for that goal of hard-boiled. As anyone knows with his later works, Takashi Miike's characters and the violence are extreme, grandiose. So yeah, it goes hard, to say the least. And as such an early work, it's interesting to see these tropes at such an early stage. Such extreme violence and sexuality. In fact, sexuality is pretty important to this one, or at least it is very important to me. Takashi Miike imbues extreme into almost every one of his works, and this is no different. The characters can be thought of as almost psychos at times. The main character is very ruthless, and in fact I think at the beginning he's quite racist too. He is brutal against the gangsters, and of course the gangsters are quite brutal too. So you see violence on both sides, and it's a movie where I found myself not rooting for this guy or rooting for this side. I found myself going, oh no, I don't want it to work out for him, but I don't want it to work out for the gangsters either. It was a movie where I was rooting against both sides, so to speak. It was an interesting experience, but at the same time, one of the most important things in a movie is, particularly for a protagonist, is to have that motivation. And because Miike's characters are often extreme, you have this intense emotion lighting a fire behind the protagonist. So even though I disliked the protagonist and the bad guys, I was still pretty into it. Another thing on my list of comparisons to DOA is its covering of topics such as mixed races. In DOA, one of the characters is mixed between, I think, Chinese, maybe Taiwanese, but he's mixed between, I think, Chinese and Japanese. And some of the side characters in the first DOA say the lines, "We look Japanese, but we aren't Japanese. We look Chinese, but we're not that either." A very interesting approach to racial identity, which suggests that racial identity is derived from othering yourself from others. If you're interested, check out my review on that movie and that trilogy. And this film has a similar topic. Tatsuhito and Yoshihito are mixed race, Taiwanese and Japanese, I think. And while Tatsuhito, he took his father's name from the Japanese side and became a law enforcer, Yoshihito sides with the Taiwanese gang. It's an interesting approach to racial identity because even though they're mixed race, they pick and choose. They're both the same kind of mixed race, but they pick and choose which side of race to be. These guys don't identify with their mixed heritage. They side with one or the other. And it's something that makes you think about how the social construct of race, and how, once again, with identity, this one addresses how it's a personal choice on how to identify with that. And to me, it shows how much race is a construct, because these guys are both they're brothers. They're the same, but they identify different ways. And it's interesting how both of them reach for power through different structures. As Tatsuhito identifies as Japanese, in Japan he identifies with the dominant culture and sides with law enforcement. Meanwhile, Yoshihito rejects that and sides with the gangsters. Another important character in this movie is Wang, the Taiwanese gang leader, who has a homosexual relationship with a character who I forget the name of, but we'll call him the gay guy. One thing that I was wrong about in my last Letterboxd logs, which I said in prognostication for what I think the Shinjuku Society holds, Shinjuku Triad Society, I said that I think that the character in this movie, Wang, identifies as gay. And I was mistaken in that, because interestingly, with a lot of Miike's works, the characters don't self-identify. I look at Ichi the Killer, where Kakihara has a homo-romantic relationship with his Yakuza boss, but never identifies as gay. In fact, I don't think any other character calls him gay. In DOA, there's a homosexual intercourse scene at the beginning, but they don't identify as gay, self-identifying, at least as far as we know. But his Yakuza boss calls him, well, it's translated as a slur, so someone else identifies. It's an outside party identifying someone else as gay. And similarly here, the closest thing is that a gang member calls Wang a fruit. And it's interesting to me because as an audience member, we and several people, I think even on the Wikipedia page, it calls Wang homosexual. And I think a lot of people will say he's gay, and even other characters in the movie and in like DOA, there's this outsider who identifies someone else's sexual orientation, but it's not really internally identified by the character. So one thing that's interesting about this work to me is how Takashi Miike is just another example of how he estranges this act of male on male, and he estranges that from the social construct that is sexual orientation. That others, even us as viewers, may identify them as gay, but in terms of themselves as characters, there's a little bit of agency to them internally where they don't self-identify. And I find that an interesting trope through this, and I find the topic of deconstructing, so to speak, these social constructs, and I agree with that approach to this, that it's just what it is, an act between two people. Whatever it's called is on the world around them. My last point on that is that this film queers heterosexuality, and I don't mean queers as in, well, I guess it's kind of a double entendre in this case, but what I mean is that there's a lot of sexual interaction between two men, and very early in the movie there's a scene with anal, I might as well say that. And later on, Tatsuhito gets with a prostitute and does a sodomy to her too. These are kind of heavy topics that I usually don't talk about in a video, but it's interesting to me because the only heterosexual act is with the same organ as a homosexual act. So it draws a correlation between the two, where even though they're treated different, how different are they really? It's something that I don't even know how much Miike intended, but stuff like that makes me think about how arbitrary sexual orientation is. Another thing I wanted to say is that the opening narration perfectly encapsulates Miike's works perfectly, saying, "This is a story about a love so sickening and sweet." And that describes so many of the relationships, so many of the stories, and several of the films. You can start almost every Miike film with that narration, and it's so appropriate that opens his first theatrical outing. But as much as I talked about the interesting ideas that are brought up in this movie, I can't necessarily get into it. There are, for one, it might just be a me thing, but in Yakuza gangster films, it's easy for me to get overwhelmed and confused. Oh, who's on this side? Who's on that? Oh, this gang and that gang. Like, it's easy for me to get lost sometimes with Yakuza gangster movies. But also, the way I like the characters, but the way the story unfolded, I wasn't really into too much of. I think that it is a movie that is interesting to see as Miike is developing his skills. It's a movie that I can love talking about interesting ideas in it, but in terms of watchability and watching a movie, it's a movie that I went in and out of, and it's just okay. And insightful for fans of Miike's to see his developing skills. And now that I scared several audience members with my talk and in-depth look at the sex in Shinjuku Triad Society, let's go on to the next movie in this trilogy, Rainy Dog. Sho Aikawa plays Yujiro, a Yakuza assassin stranded in Taiwan. When his latest hit drops a case full of cash, he grabs the money and runs with his kid and a prostitute. It's about the assassin needing to get home. Home is a very important theme in these movies, but I'll get more into that with the last one. The best thing I can say about this movie is that I like how it plays with empathy. And from the Shinjuku Triad Society movie, that one definitely played with empathy in an interesting way, where it's the two characters are very, very dislikable, the two forces in the story. And this one, it plays with empathy in an inverse of in the typical film way, where Aikawa's character, the protagonist, he doesn't bat an eye when making his latest kill. He doesn't care about his kid, and he's emotionally reserved throughout most of the movie. But the most recent kill was a leader of a gang, and his brother tries to assume control to get revenge. But no one takes him seriously because he's mostly a civilian. And the gang members laugh him off at one point in the movie and don't take him seriously. You see him at the funeral for his brother, and it evokes a lot of empathy for the bad guy, while the main character is emotionless. It's an interesting movie because it stirs a lot of emotion for the antagonistic force while breeding not good feelings towards the protagonist. While I liked the chase and the runaway story, the apathy of the main character is its biggest flaw and killed much of the movie for me. Miike has, and this word comes up a lot when talking about Miike, extremes. And he approaches Aikawa's character, the character's unfeelingness is extreme. And what I mean is that there's one point where he's bunkering down with the prostitute and his kid, and he almost says nothing. There's no touching moment where he opens up with them. And while that is in character for his cold nature, it doesn't make an interesting movie now, does it? Where the protagonist is so emotionally detached in scenes, and thus from the audience, how can we get behind him? The movie didn't have to give Aikawa's character such an intense apathy because it kills a lot of the momentum behind the viewer. I don't feel like I want to watch and see the rest of it because the main character is that detached and uninteresting. There's not enough there for me to... There's not enough there. Beyond that, I've coined the term Miike-isms for weird moments in Takashi Miike movies, and often that can kind of save a movie. I'll think of a movie and think, oh, that scene of his was great. But here, it's for the most part tame. There's not an outrageous moment in it, so once again, the character's not that interesting, and there's not that much shock value typical of Miike in this. So I was tempted to say I think its story is better than Shinjuku Triad, but there's not a lot of emotion there for most of it that I felt that I wasn't too into the movie. And that's not anything on Aikawa's performance because I love the actor, so that's its own thing. But luckily, I get to see him in the last of the Black Society Trilogy, Ley Lines. Oh, but before I move on to the next one, I wanted to address Rainy Dog's American remake. Now, people are going to say, what do you mean American remake? This isn't on the Wikipedia page. I don't see mentions of it anywhere. Aha, and you can't because the video interview that this is mentioned in was taken off of YouTube. And I was surprised to see it was taken off because I had used it within my One Missed Call review. So I had a piece of lost media that documents a movie that never got made, and there's not press about it being even considered for a remake. So I'm going to include this in the video just because I think it's very interesting that Rainy Dog almost got an American remake. The lead male actor of One Missed Call remake talked about how Katakawa approached him for a remake of Rainy Dog, and well, One Missed Call failed and they dropped Rainy Dog American remake. Probably for the best, because I'm not too big a fan on the Japanese original anyway, but hey, here's the clip that I archived on archive.org, and well, I'll just play this out here.
Is Katakawa the company that owns the rights to the original and made this film? They gave me a DVD of this unknown Japanese hitman movie from the mid-90s called Rainy Dog. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh yeah, it's another McKee movie.
Yeah. We're doing a remake of that set in 1902 New York.
Now for Ley Lines. A trio of young adults run away from home and get involved with Shinjuku's seedy underbelly. One of my favorite things about this movie is its tone. It has a teenage anger, a burning frustration behind it. It nails the youthful angst and impulse in the characters. Particularly the main one, Ryuichi, who is played by Kazuki Kitamura, who is just great at playing his aggression. He is in one of Takashi Miike's earliest films and earliest collaborations with Toshiki Kimura, which is The Way to Fight. And he is... I want to watch that movie. This movie convinced me. This movie drew me to that because his anger is so convincing, as is the rest of the cast. They feel so true to life. And this is perhaps where Miike's trope of creating extreme characters who still feel real, this is where he perhaps chiseled it to perfection the first time. And, not to say it's better than anything after, but this is where I was like, this is right. This is Miike. Oh, and since I mentioned Toshiki Kimura, I want to make an addendum to a mistake that I made in my DOA trilogy, where I said that Ichiro Ryu wrote the first and third movie. I mean, technically, he is credited as one of the writers, but to my shame, I forgot to mention that Ichiro Ryu is a pseudonym for Toshiki Kimura. And I learned this because this movie, Ley Lines, is written by Ichiro Ryu. And looking it up, it was actually written by Toshiki Kimura. So, hey, sorry about that mistake in my earlier video, but at least I get to correct it here. The narrative and overall emotions of a scene are strongly dictated by the characters, as they should be, because it's about teenagers. The emotions as a youth, if you'll remember, are pretty strong. So it's a dominating force behind how the scenes play out in the movie. And it's something that interests me because comparatively to DOA 1, this came out the same year as Dead or Alive and Audition. And these are all three are very different movies. Takashi Miike is a hard worker. It's crazy how many movies he could make. And this came out with DOA and Audition, and they're so varied. DOA, if you watched my review, I mentioned how the filmography is very matter of fact, but here the scenes are so strongly approached through how the character's feeling. Like there's this one scene where a character senses that his friend is in danger and runs through the streets in a slow-mo. Camera has a red filter over it. Visually and everything, it's controlled by that character's emotion. And Audition is kind of like trying to be like 3 at most, maybe like 2.5 movies in like one movie. The point I'm trying to make is that it's surprising to me that Takashi Miike can be so varied, have so varied films, and it makes me question, even though I love this director, how much can I say is a style of his? Because it's something that I like about him, and an interview of his, he says he doesn't identify with the term auteur. He prefers being called an arranger. And I think that looking at the films within this one year, 1999, you see that. He doesn't make a film work his certain way or how in a certain style that is 100% his. He pursues these scripts as he sees fit, as he sees the best approach to this script. Okay, this one needs this, and this one needs this. And it's something that I can fully appreciate having watched this film. Out of this whole trilogy, this is the strongest in terms of its theme on homes. A theme that seems important to Miike. I remember reading an interview where he talks about how his grandma was in South Korea during World War II, and during that time, Miike grew up, his family was from Kumamoto, but when his grandma moved back to Japan, his family moved to Osaka. And it's this immigration of from, I guess, province or prefecture is the right term, where Miike feels that he doesn't have a hometown. And I think that's why he connects to these stories, because you can tell out of this trilogy, these are characters motivated and in search of a home. And speaking of the youthfulness, the youthful characters of this movie, they too are also, I think they're of Chinese descent, maybe mixed race. They endured racism in their youth, and they want to just run away from Japan. And I thought they would be running away to China because that's where their heritage lies. But fittingly true to youthfulness, one scene is where they go, oh, we want to run away to, oh, where do we want to run away to? How about Brazil? There's this authentic aimlessness to them that, I don't care where we're going, I just want to get out. That feels so relatable and true to the feelings of youth. You hate this society that you're thrusted into unwillingly, and you just want to get out of it. The emotions of this, I really connected with them. I think I relate to the frustration, having an overseas girlfriend, and the sense of wanting to move somewhere and who's gonna move. I understand that frustrating feeling of wanting to get out, but not exactly knowing solid to where. And that's something that perhaps connected to me, but regardless of that, I just felt the emotions from these characters. They have a strong bond that drew me in. Beyond the characters, which are usually my favorite thing in a Miike film, if the story isn't too great, you can usually count on the characters. In fact, going back to DOA 2, that film is like 80% character and like 20% story, but I love it for that. And this film reminded me of DOA 2 because of how it approached the friendship of the characters and how important it was and how controlling it was of the script. This is probably my favorite movie within the Black Society Trilogy. It still has weird, violent, and sexual moments. So it has definitely Miike-isms, as I would say. But like the best of his films, it has heart. And the emotions of the characters are what sell it for me. To add on to that, even though the structure of the story, they keep getting sent back to square one because they're young adults. They don't know what they're doing in the criminal underworld. They keep getting sent back. But they have a motivation to keep trying and moving forward that keeps me in the movie, even if in terms of the plot, it might not be moving a lot so much at the first bit, but I'm still into it because the characters are motivated, and I love that. The plot gets more going in the latter half, and to that point, I love how the story unfolds. Not just in terms of the characters, but it's satisfying in terms of a narrative too. Without a doubt, Ley Lines is my favorite of the Black Society Trilogy, and I think this is, even though I haven't seen his entire filmography, he has like over 100, it's hard to watch them all, especially since some of the earlier ones aren't in English. I would say Ley Lines is definitely worth watching because I think it's where he finds his style, where Miike finds his style. Even though this is a cohesive compilation of some of Miike's earliest outings, I don't think it's the best to start here. As I said, even as a Miike fan, I wasn't too into Rainy Dog, and Shinjuku Triad Society, I went in and out of. It's not his best, but Ley Lines, I'm like, yeah, he got there. This is the Miike I know. So this is not for people who want to start off exploring the director's filmography, but for fans of the director who want to see how he began. So those are my thoughts on the Black Society Trilogy. I hope viewers of mine who have seen my other Takashi Miike reviews, more fully produced, don't mind this impromptu look. I wanted to get something out there on the director because a user commented that I should do Takashi Miike May, a Miike May series. So, well, it's May, and even if whether or not I get other videos out there, I wanted to at least get this one out, and hopefully it will satisfy you. I don't like doing written reviews of movies I've only seen once, so consider this a first impression, and hopefully I'll revisit the topic of this trilogy in a scripted video that I can more fully produce, and maybe more akin to what you are used to seeing in my other Takashi Miike videos. But as is, I kind of like getting my ideas off the cuff and seeing how they develop as I talk through them. These are some interesting films to think about, and hopefully seeing the gears turn in my head processing them was appealing in its own way. I thank you all for watching, and stay tuned for any other videos I do. So, see ya!